do. Good evening, councillors and members of the public. Welcome to the Cabinet meeting of the 1st of December. If we start with apologies for absence, I have Councillor Russell Perrin, Councillor Mike Hardware, Councillor Steve Ramey and Councillor James Lappard. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any? Councillor Vince?
I don't know if I have to declare, I can't remember, but just to declare, obviously there's an item about which I do work at which
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meetings, we've got the 13th of October and the 17th of November. See them agreed?
Agreed.
Any matters arising from those minutes? Councillor Durkin?
Yes, it's in relation to questions that were asked by a number of the residents of 5 Acres. And whilst I know that you've now sacked your Housing Cabinet member, there was an indication that you would be bringing back some update in relation to what you were doing about 5 Acres. And I noticed it's not in the forward plan. So from a matter of rising, is it possible to seek clarification over that matter that was promised to those people?
All residents of 5 Acres have been written to, and as a councillor, I'm sure you'll receive a written update on that area as well.
And for the record, could we just be given a very brief explanation of what you're offering the residents of 5 Acres?
It's not something I'll discuss at the moment. As I say, they've all been written to. Accordingly, I've spoken to a number of them, and as a councillor, you'll receive a written update as well. Moving on to Item 5, written questions from the public. We have 2, beginning with Mr. Thorpe.
Can I ask Councillor Schools, when you do reply, could you speak up a bit, because it's not a very good sound system in this room, and you've got a quiet voice. Yeah, right, okay. Now, the Ulster House refurbishment is supposed to be in 114k ordinary available budget. But as Councillor May hasn't allowed me to be part of the discussions as promised, and my FIFOIA application has only been partly addressed, which may force me to ask commissioners to look into why this is. At this moment in time, I have no way of knowing how much the Trust will be contributing to the cost over and above the amount of 22k we are committed in our Trust budget. So my question is twofold. When will we be allowed to see these costings after being presented with a paper company, and why are the funds allocated to the neighbourhood office being transferred to the Lattenbush Centre when they could be used to refurbish Ulster House?
Thank you for your question, and I fully recognise your passion and commitment to this project. As you are aware, this has been fully reviewed in light of rising construction costs, the state of disrepair to building, and ultimately value for money to the taxpayer. At the time of the proposal coming forward before the pandemic, a capital budget of £225,520 was allocated to cover works and professional fees required to bring the building up to a lettable standard. Since then, construction costs and inflation have risen dramatically, and financial restraints on the council have increased. The most recent quote for the works to bring the property up to a lettable standard from HDS, submitted through a business case, was £349,172. However, given the rising inflation, construction costs and worsening state of the building, it's a realistic and accurate assumption that the works required would be in excess of £400,000. I must be honest that this presents a difficult situation, and certainty about the project is urgently required. Therefore, officers and I will arrange to meet with you next week to discuss this and next steps. We are absolutely committed to investing in health and wellbeing, as Councillor Charles will set out shortly, and further to the regeneration of Watt Street neighbourhood, and I'll announce further plans to do so in the very near future. With regard to your question about the vehement from the neighbourhood office to the Lattenbush Centre, this is in line with the regeneration plans we're working on and allows us to address an urgent situation at the Lattenbush Centre. Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Thorpe?
Yes, I have, but I appreciate that you will meet with us in a week's time or whenever it's convenient going from the non-housing capital budget Appendix 2 for the quarter 2 22-23, it clearly states the Lafton Bush Centre has a current budget of 642,243 and a projected outrun of 528,183, leaving a balance of 114,060. So I ask why you're drawing on funds from the other building. The community buildings has a current budget of 929,475 with a projected outrun of 472,880, leaving a balance of 456,595. And on the total financial management, which includes Lafton, Bush Centre, etc., it has a budget of 4,358,605 with a projected outrun of 3,413,994.
If we can get to the end of your question, Mr. Thorpe, that'd be appreciated.
944,611. So how can it be said that there's no monies available to repair Osler House and support the Potter Street Health and Wellbeing Hub when this proposal is clearly needed?
Thank you for your further question. I think you've taken us through the capital programme. As you'll recognise, the council has a large number of issues to address in the non-housing capital programme on a number of buildings around the town. And each of those budgets are allocated to specific projects. They're not figures plucked out of thin air, hence the specific nature of the figures. As I said, specifically on your project, we'll be meeting with you in the next week or so to discuss this further. I believe we have a second question, Mr.
Yes, I do have a second question. The Potter Street Health and Wellbeing Trust proposal clearly follows not only the Robert Wood Johnson model, but also the Core 20 Plus. If Harlow is classed as the second worst town in Essex and the 20th in the whole of England, for deprivation, child poverty, health, crime, etc., and the various different bodies I've been working with, such as Harlow Poverty Alliance, Heart and West Essex, ICB, recognise the value of wellbeing hubs as such as the Trust is proposing. Why is this council putting costs before the wellbeing of Harlow's population when adequate funds are available in the capital budget to push the Trust proposal forward?
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. The Health and Wellbeing Strategy includes a number of statistics that paint a sobering picture of the key public health issues facing our town today. That is why the Council has taken the decision to depart from the previous approaches used to tackle health and wellbeing challenges to look at ways, as community leader, to curb the socio-economic determinants that compound the issues highlighted in the strategy. The Council's approach will be governed not only by the strategy, but also the actions it agrees to take forward with key partners to address health and wellbeing inequalities in the town. Part of the ambition of the strategy is to seek further investment from Essex County Council as the lead public health authority and other health bodies to arrest the trend of avoidable wellbeing issues. The Council is looking at how it achieves the better outreach of wellbeing services across the town. And part of that work has been the continued funding of the community hub operated by Rainbow Services. There is a continued dialogue with our local healthcare leaders at Essex County Council through a partnership approach that the Council hopes to build on further as officers provide evidence to them about the effectiveness of the hub approach. In taking all this forward, it is always important to look carefully at how we deploy the Council's limited resources across the town. The Council is committed to actively working with the Potter Street Wellbeing Hub Trust to seek to find venues from which it can commence running some wellbeing activities in the Potter Street area. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Thorpe, do you have a supplementary question?
No, I haven't, but I would like to take the opportunity to thank both yourself and Councillor Charles, that we will have an opportunity to meet and discuss this in full, rather than it being pushed to one side, as it appears to have been done for the last 2 years. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. If you just turn the microphone off there as well, Mr. Thorpe. We come now to questions from councillors. Councillor Vince.
Thank you, Chair. Following the terrible news about AWAB, what work has Harlow Council done to inspect its housing stock to ensure that our properties are free from mould and that damp management and damp controls are in place and being used properly?
The harrowing case of AWAB highlights the potentially devastating effects of damp and mould. Any case of damp and mould must be treated with absolute seriousness. We're reviewing every case of damp and mould in our properties that have been reported to us, and we'll do all it takes to deal with all issues appropriately and immediately. Put in place changes to internal processes with immediate effect, which I'm confident will improve our response to any such case, and we keep this under daily review from now on. As Secretary of State Michael Gove has made clear, it's absolutely not acceptable to pass these problems as a lifestyle issue. No one in our town should have to live in a home plagued with damp and mould. That should not be a high bar to set. And that's why we'll be taking real action to address all cases. That's supplementary.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You've mentioned obviously the change of process, but what specific changes to the process have been made, and how much money does Michael Gove give you to implement them?
Focusing on the things we can control, I will write to you the details of the change to internal processes. And we haven't had any money. We come now to petitions. There are none. So we move on to the forward plan. Are there any questions on the forward plan? On the forward plan specifically, not speculation about what may be involved in reports. Councillor Durkin.
Yes, thank you. In relation to item on page 24, 113,963, and also linking it to page 25, 103,968, I asked a similar question last time, and it was battered back. And I ask again, as these programmes are similar or the same, why have they not been placed together as a collective on the basis of the more work that we can put out on a collective, the better opportunity we will be able to have to work with one partner. So my clarification, which is my right, is to ask, why have these two not been put together?
Thank you for the question. The first part of which is because they're separate contracts, that's why they're two separate items. Second part of the question as to why they're separate contracts is partly, as you will recognise from the geographical locations of those schemes, there may not be as much economy of scale when putting them all into one contract in terms of prelims as you may think. It's also the case of the types of properties that are included in those schemes differ, and therefore it again may not be of such economy of scale as you may otherwise think. I hope that answers your question. However, I would just say that obviously those contract awards will come to Cabinet at the appropriate time, and I think it would be wise to save your specific questions on those schemes until that point.
My second question is in relation to page 25 regarding public realm improvements. Could you please clarify when will it be anticipated after this report has gone through, when the work will be started and completed?
That's detail that we set out in that report. The point I want to stress to you is that questions on the forward plan are not about the detail of the items because you don't have the report in front of you. So when that report comes to Cabinet, it will have the details of when that scheme will start. But
so as a Cabinet member, you don't know?
I know very well.
Oh, you do know, but you're not telling us?
I do indeed, but we are currently 3 months out from that point, so I can't give you a date. Okay. But that work will start on. If you have any further questions on...
Yeah, absolutely. So as a council so far, we're not being told what's happening about 5 acres, and we're also now not being told when the public realm will be...
I don't think that's a question on forward plan, so I'm going to move on to the Cabinet needs to note the forward plan. Is that noted? Noted.
On page 27...
Sorry, Councillor Derrick, we've moved on. We've noted the forward plan, we're moving on to the next item on the agenda.
Oh, come on, constitutionally this can't be correct. If a person has the right to ask questions, they have the right, you have the right to refuse to answer them, which clearly you're doing, or both the CEOs could actually rule me out. But just because I'm asking a question and so you move it on, that cannot be right.
Perhaps we can take advice from the Chief Executive.
Well, I'm looking to take advice.
Well, first point is you have one Chief Executive in the room at present, not two. It would be inappropriate for the council to have two serving chief execs in the same room. You have a chief executive and a chief executive designate. So the interim chief exec will give you an answer. You intimated two questions. There were two questions answered.
No, I didn't say.
You stopped, and the chair then moved to note for the cabinet to note the paper, which they did. So the chair has moved on, and that is quite. He is allowed to do so.
So I'm requesting that I'm allowed to ask those questions that are pending. Are you denying me that right?
I'm simply giving you an interpretation as you asked. The chair has moved the agenda on.
Right. So you're concurring with the chair that the agenda is moving on.
If you let me finish, the chair has moved the agenda on, and that is his prerogative. I am not stopping you doing anything. I'm simply giving you advice.
So we are now moving on with the agenda.
No, can I just say, first of all, thank you. I welcome the advice, but I find it appalling that a democratically elected person halfway through is denied the opportunity of asking questions on the forward plan. I think that tells us what democracy is really like in Harlow Council. But I will reluctantly, professionally accept your advice.
And if you have any further questions on the full plan outside the meeting, I'll be more than happy to answer them in writing. Moving on to the next item, which also for noting relevant decisions taken by the leader, deputy or portfolio holders. Noted. If you have a question, we'll take the question.
The portfolio holders, I appreciate you're not the leader of the council yet, and I can't, I'm not either, but yeah, but anyway, I can't, you're not here, he's not here, but I just would like to ask a few questions on the decisions made by the leader, and obviously these can be passed on to him. So the first one is 9B, which is about the roundabout scheme. I just wondered if this could be asked, whether HTS would consider for this scheme, because my understanding is the idea is that you sponsor a roundabout and the money from sponsorship will go towards the company that is going to maintain the roundabout. So I understand we own half and actually take half and half. But if HTS was to do that, surely that would mean actually the money for sponsorship would go direct to HTS, which could potentially aid their work. And I just wondered, had they been considered, had they done a bid, or was it just that they just felt that wasn't possible? So if that could be asked, that would be brilliant.
The short answer to the question is yes, they were considered throughout the process, and it was an open tender process as well. And I hope that answers that question.
Sorry, so the last thing again.
It was an open tender process in which any company could bid.
I missed that bit. Sorry, people have got.
It was an open tender process.
Right. Okay.
In
Sorry.
which any company could bid for the work, but preceding it going to tender, HCS were involved in the process.
So HCS would run the tender. Yeah. Okay. Right. Next question then obviously is about appointments to cabinet and portfolio delegations. It says the cabinet members and portfolios of responsible delegations be amended as attached in Appendix A. I couldn't see Appendix A in the report, so could you outline what that decision was?
Perhaps I can just ask the monitoring officer to advise whether it was included in the report.
It was certainly included in the report on the website. This is just a decision notice, so it's a background paper.
Oh, okay, fine. So, assuming that it was something to do with housing, I don't know, I literally was guessing now. My understanding is we haven't actually replaced the role which has been vacated by Councillor Carter, and it's going to be done between you and Councillor Perrin, and that is concerned to me. I think housing is a massive issue for this town, obviously. Is that a permanent situation, or is that a temporary situation? Any idea how that's going to be resolved?
Firstly, I find it interesting that you asked me to tell you what the decision was and then repeat the decision back to me. But on the specific of your question, the details were set out in the decision notice, and the subsequent delegations reflected the position we have. As you'll know, appointments to the Cabinet are a matter for the Leader of the Council, and I'm sure he would be happy to answer any questions or can. Councillor Durkin.
Just in case we want to move on too quickly. In relation to the Leader of the Council, whilst it is not in the decision notification, the Leader of the Council, with both yourself, made a clear commitment that you would be bringing forward a report in relation to the atrocious situation where people are living under tarpaulin instead of roofs. Would it be possible for us to have an update on where we are on that situation? Because clearly there is nothing in the forward plan that indicates that commitment.
There's two things I'd say to that. One, I think you are stretching the bounds of the decision notice, but given the sensitivity around the issue you ask, I'll answer it. Actually, if you look at the HRA paper, there is a reflection that we've got in front of us tonight. There is a reflection of that situation and how we're addressing it. We are taking absolute action on that situation, and I'm fully confident that that will be addressed as soon as is physically possible. I think about the report you're referring to, maybe the report that's going to the Scrutiny Committee, as decided by the Scrutiny Committee. I understand it's going to their February meeting. But as I say, on the specific of the issue you're asking, I'm absolutely confident that we're doing everything we can to address that issue, and it is referenced in the HRA papers that we'll come on to later this evening. But we genuinely, and if you want to ask about that, ask about it at that point, because this is about noting the relevant decisions taken by the leader, deputy or portfolio holders at the moment, and that is not one of those decisions.
So just to clarify, even though you made a commitment that a report would be coming out in a couple of weeks to tell our residents why they're living under tarpaulin, you're saying it goes to scrutiny before you will make any decision?
It's the last question I'll take on the matter, because you're clearly not respecting what I'm saying. No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Well, what are you saying?
I'm saying exactly what I said in my previous answer. So if we move on to noting those relevant decisions, are they noted?
Noted.
Thank you. I now propose that we take item 10, 11, 12 on block, given their nature. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
And I will propose those items. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Have we got any questions on these three items? Councillor Vince.
So page 32, you've recorded in the second quarter that you've made an overspend of £666,000. So am I correct in saying that coupled with £1.2 million overspend last year means this administration in 18 months has overspent by £1.8 million?
Thank you for the question. No, I don't think that's a fair reflection of what the situation is. The £600,000 that you reference is reported in that report. It's largely down to pressures of COVID, particularly with car parking, reduction in use of the Manning Centre and lettings at the Innovation Park that we're confident that we're addressing. But I don't feel it's a fair reflection. I think at the point you're getting at that we're somehow being loose with the purse strings.
No, that wasn't my question. My question is it right to say that over the last 18 months you've overspent by £1.8 million?
Perhaps I can ask the Director of Finance to comment on the question.
So the position for last year has clearly been previously reported to Cabinet, and at the moment the 666,000 is a projection of where we anticipate the Council may be by the end of the financial year. That position may change adversely or positively over the next 6 months, and that is our current estimate of projection for the current year.
Any other questions on those items? Councillor Vince.
Page 34 talks about additional pressures on council finances, and you mentioned some of them in your previous remark, but you don't mention decreasing funding from central government. I wonder why that didn't emerge from the report.
I'm sure you'll be well aware of the Chancellor's statement that he made a few weeks ago, and that wasn't a reflection of what the Chancellor said in that statement. I know you may wish to hark back to the past 12 years, but that wasn't a reflection of what the Chancellor said in his recent statement, and that's why it's not included in this item.
yeah, the point important, that was the point I was making. You're right, that actually we've lost a lot of money over the last 12 years because of the government taking away money. I don't know why that's not mentioned in the report.
Further question, Councillor Lynch?
Yeah, that was a question. This is just as a sort of personal out of interest. Page 40 is obviously a mention of homelessness. I think we'll all agree that we're concerned about the increase of rough sleepers across Harlow. Obviously, I declare as I did work for street centre, I don't anymore, so I'm less aware of kind of what's going on. But I wondered if SWEP was going to be put in place over winter. I believe it's when you've got 2 nights of below 0 degrees temperature.
And I'll take that question away and ask for the Director of Housing to provide with you with the details of what we're doing over the winter period. Any other questions? Councillor Lynch? Or Councillor Griggs, if you want to ask a question.
Would you also agree, so this is from Councillor Griggs, do they acknowledge that the impact of finance on Harlow Council's finance, which has been affected by the mini budget of Carting might be a part, should be included in this report?
I'm not aware that is referenced in the report, and as you'll be aware, you're supposed to focus on things that are referenced in the report, and no, I don't believe that's the case. So do we have any other questions on the reports?
Surely I should be able to ask what isn't in the report and why it's not in the report.
As I've said, I don't think that is a thing that needs to be included in this report.
Page 54, one of my other favourite bugbears, staff sickness, absences and vacancies. I raise this all the time, but we are still here, and I have asked for a list of vacancies in departments, and I'm still waiting for that 2 months on. So the question I ask again, and I appreciate you might take it away, but what are we doing to address the huge issues with vacancies within the council, and what are we doing to support our current staff to make sure that we don't have any further vacancies?
If I start at the end of your question about what we're doing for current staff, there's a number of things which I am aware the leader of the council set out to in writing a few weeks back. In terms of your specific point of the number of vacancies in each area across the board, I understand the Director of Government's writing to you those details. And in terms of the wider question you're asking about vacancies generally, as you'll be aware, it is a difficult budget situation as it is for all local authorities in the country. We're focusing on service delivery, and I'm absolutely confident about the action we're taking on that. But I may ask the Interim Chief Executive to comment on that further.
Thank you, Chair. We are facing a very difficult budget this year, and that's common to every local authority that I know of across the UK. We are, at a senior management level, we are monitoring every vacancy we currently have in the organisation. We are only actively filling current vacancies which are service essential. And we're doing that because we want to give ourselves the flexibility, depending on what the administration put forward in the budget, to allow us to avoid any potential risk of redundancies coming forward. So that allows us to look for people to have other opportunities without leaving the organisation. So it is about trying to be protective of our staff as we move into our budget. And if you look at other local authorities and what they've been saying, we are not in the same position as many who are already starting to say that there are lots of jobs at risk. We are trying to avoid that in any opportunity that we can.
Any further questions, Councillor?
I've got a few because you've bundled things together, so I've got quite a lot. Thank you for both of the officers for their answers, but obviously you said that the overspend of 660k was a projection. But looking at this document, I've identified, and I might have done the numbers wrong, £448,000 identified as savings on staff costs, bear in mind what we just said. So does that mean if we are actually to fill some of the staff in vacancies, although you're suggesting we're not going to fill all of them, does that mean it's likely that the overspend could be higher than 666,000?
I would hope that that figure is not higher. As Director of Finance has already said, that's a projection. At this point in the year, we've still got 4 months of the year to run, and I would be expecting the council to look to its officers to try and reduce that gap as much as possible in the last 4 months of the year. If we're making savings on vacancies, that is because even if we were filling a post, the likelihood is that we will have a period of vacancy in that post, and that will give us a particular saving as we run forward. So you shouldn't read into that figure that either it's going to be worse or that we are trying to close posts down, because we're not at present.
Thank you for that, Mr. Simeon. On the point you made about obviously trying to close that gap, have you got any ideas other than what we just discussed in terms of staff vacancies on how you intend to close that budget gap?
There's lots of different ways that every local authority uses to try and close budget gaps, and that is about managing how we spend money, managing how we procure goods and services, timetabling recruitment advertising, timetabling when we actually put procurement projects out. There's a number of things that we can do to try and ensure that we save money, and that's including how we use our premises.
Yeah, we should do that. But on page 69, obviously you can go on reduced staff costs, and councillors, you mentioned about the importance of service delivery. But how much of the issues are due to the number of vacancies, and what is the ongoing effect on service delivery attributed to these vacancies? And for example, I've used page 77 altogether for you quickly. Page 77, increase your wait time to come to Harlow, for example, which is another bugbear of mine.
If I ask Councillor Gunn's comment on contact Harlow.
Happily. So the question is what impact vacancies are having on performance. I think we discussed this last discussion. As things stand right now, I believe all the vacancies at Contact Harlow are filled. They certainly were the last time I received an update, which was recently. There have been some challenges in that service area, but those are currently resolved. There was lead time training people up, of course, so I think there's a continuing impact, which is reflected perhaps in other parts of the JFPR this time around. But I'm satisfied in that particular area we are where we need to be. There are vacancies in other areas, of course, which isn't always helpful, I suppose.
Just to add to that answer, as the interim chief executive said, we are filling posts for service delivery to avoid the point you're making.
So two questions in response to that. I mean, first of all, good news in terms of filling in those vacancies in Contact Harlow, but we still know that the waiting times in Contact Harlow are too high. So I just wondered if the portfolio could give you reassurances that actually that will improve. I understand what you're saying about leading times of training, but just interested in your thoughts on that.
I share Councillor Binns' concern at the waiting times. They have been going in the wrong direction. It's a matter of record. I'm satisfied that the next time we're here talking about a JFPR, they'll have gone in the right direction. I don't think we're going to hit the targets in the next quarter, which has to be the aim. But I'm satisfied based on what I'm aware from this quarter that the performance will be improved, and that is in large part, I believe, down to vacancies being filled and the new recruits being trained up. And it should be said, the quality of the existing staff in Contact Harlow.
I echo the points about staff. You said that you were focusing your recruitment on frontline delivery staff and officers. So are there any roles that you are actively not looking to replace or fill that aren't considered as vital?
Just before I ask the interim chief executive to comment, he has already answered this in saying that all vacancies will be reviewed weekly by the senior management board, and decisions will be taken in that way. But if there's anything further you wish to add.
I don't know if there is anything further. I thought I'd given you a full enough answer, but we are reviewing all vacancies. We are filling service essential vacancies and holding other vacancies, and we're holding those vacancies deliberately to try and protect our staff against any adverse impact when we get to budget, depending on the nature of the budget savings we've got to find when we announce them in January.
So as the opposition, are we allowed to know which of those vacancies you're hopping back?
Well, that will be in the report that you've already asked the Director of Governance to produce, and that has already been alluded to by the Chair.
Just to clarify, this is a slightly different question, because what I'm asking for is all vacancies and the percentage of each department. What I'm asking you is which of those vacancies you're actively holding back, and also there's a slightly different question.
You will have a list of all the vacancies, and that will be the vacancies per se. There will be a complete list of all the vacancies that are sitting unfilled and unadvertised.
But you're not telling me which ones you're not seeking to fill. That's what I'm asking. Because there's two types of vacancies here. There's vacancies that you want to fill because they're frontline delivery, and there's ones that you don't consider frontline delivery. It would be useful to know which one of those are.
But any vacancy that is standing empty is one that we're not treating as a frontline vacancy at present in terms of being service essential.
Perhaps if I can simplify it, if it is in that list, it will be considered service critical as the list you will receive.
But then you don't know what the other vacancies are.
So then I don't know what the other vacancies are that aren't considered service critical. Do you see? I mean,
Perhaps we can clarify that in the written answer.
Yes, that's what I'm asking for. Thank you.
Have we got any other questions on those reports?
So, sorry, Chair, can you just clarify? What are you bundling together? Is it 10, 11 and 12, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So this is question item 11HRA. This is from Councillor Wilson, who's unable to attend, but wants to ask a question about housing. Can you let me know what the rent rise will be in 2023-24? I appreciate you might be about to do it now, and because we understand the government intends to cap social housing rent at 7%.
You are correct in the government announcement recently, and the social housing rent level will be set in the budget early in the new year, as it has been for the last very many years. So that will be listed in the budget papers when they come out.
So you haven't made a decision at this stage?
No, as I said, they'll be set in those budget papers. Any further questions? Councillor Griggs.
Yes, I'm going to refer to page 68 if I may. Equality and diversity performance only appears to warrant an update once a year, whereas many of these other reports are getting quarterly reviews on that. Why is that unimportant enough that it's just produced once a year?
Just before I may bring in the portfolio overall director, as you'll be aware, all reports have quality impact assessments carried out. The equality and diversity inclusivity policy is extensive, and we are following that policy. I'm not sure if there's anything more that the portfolio holder wishes to add. Councillor John?
Yeah. Thank you. This is an annual report. It has been going back, I'm not sure how many years. I think I've seen these reports from 3, 4, 5 years ago. I'm not adverse to increased reporting, but it's not currently something that's been done. It's not something that's been considered. If you want to work with me and with Simon, head of service, on this to see what more we could be doing, if we can get that information, happy to have that conversation.
Councillor Vince?
So I did miss you out, and that was one of them. I can go with what you're saying. It's not part of it. We know it hasn't been done, but it's just something perhaps we could look at in the future as a council doing. I read on page 59 of this appointment, this is one for you, Councillor Gunn, we've got an extended time frame for adopting the climate change strategy. I just wondered why that time frame has been extended.
Thanks. Yes, that was actually in the previous full plan. I showed disappointment. I care very deeply about improving what we're doing on climate change, on developing strategy. This council unanimously declared a climate emergency in 2019. 3 years on, we have now, this administration, set net zero targets for its own operations. That was in the carbon reduction plan report last year. There is an opportunity to go further. It's a big body of work. I think it's fair to say that the scale of the challenge perhaps wasn't reflected in the previous timelines that were given. I'm a little frustrated that it's been pushed back as far as it has. That may be necessary. If there's any way of getting the report through sooner, I'll be doing that. I'll be pushing for that. And I should say I am having good conversations with, I've had a good conversation with the interim chief exec, with the chief exec designate last week, and there are workshops that are beginning to go underway, officer-led in specific service areas to continue that work. We also have a report from a consultancy called Ibex Earth that we commissioned, which I believe is a good basis for us to work from. So there is progress. There's certainly a desire on my part, and I believe that's shared by the administration widely, to get this done right. And I regret the time scale, but I'm doing all I can to make sure it's the right thing.
Any further questions on those reports? Any comments? Councillor Vince?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have to, raise my concerns as I've had in the question there about the overspend, or at least the projected overspend. We know there was overspend last year of 1.2 million. We are looking at a projected overspend of 666,000. It's not a very nice number if you're superstitious, but that's a 1.8 million pound overspend in more than that in the space of 18 months. I think we should be concerned and take that very, very seriously. And I share with the administration trepid excitement about some of the potential things that we move forward with, particularly the appointment of a new chief executive, chief executive designate as he is now. But I think we have to be very, very realistic about the finances. And I can sit here, as I do very often, about who I blame, the Conservative government. However, the reality is we are all facing this issue together. I think we also need to be concerned about the staff vacancies and what that means to the performance of the council. I spend a lot of time knocking on doors talking to residents, and the concerns that I have raised from council tenants is vast. The question of mould I brought earlier, I speak to residents who have water dripping down their house. Now, I recognise that not all issues in council houses are the fault of the council, but we also need to recognise that the council very often gets blamed. You have to walk down the street and say you're a council and get blamed for potholes, and you have to explain that actually you're not a county council to know that actually Harlow District Council will get the blame whether it should or not. But we do know that sometimes we should get the blame, and actually we do need to do more to support our residents. I have some sympathy for Councillor Gunn, because I do recognise that he generally does care about the climate strategy, and I pledge for my part, as Leader of the Opposition, to do everything I can to support him to bring that forward. Because ultimately, you and I can argue red and blue as much as we like, but if the whole of the world has fallen apart, it's a bit relevant, isn't it, really? So I pledge to support you on that, because I will keep asking you about it, because it's the right thing to do, and I will keep asking you about Contact Harlow, because it's the right thing to do. But the reason I ask those questions is because I want the best for the people of Harlow, and actually that comes before the political political end. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any further comments on those reports? In which case we'll move to the vote. See that agreed? Agreed. Which takes us on to item 13 and 14, which I propose again we take together. Can I see that agreed?
Agreed.
Are there any questions on those two items? Any comments? Councillor Vince?
Yeah, so 13 and 14, this is my point scoring really. These are two examples of the Conservative government's disdain for local government really. Not only have we got a loan debt of £200 million because the government decided we had to buy back our council house stock, we also have to foot the bill for the local council tax support scheme, which we should if we have to, but we have to recognise actually this was previously reimbursed by the government. So I think, I support, just in support of these two documents, but I think we need to recognise the additional burden that this government has put on this council.
Sorry, Chair, with your permission, I don't believe that item's moved and seconded.
I do apologise. If I move that item, can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
I was listening.
Any further comments? In which case we'll go to the vote. See that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Which takes us to item 15, local council tax support scheme proposals. If I move that, can I see a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? Any comments?
I've got a bit better last one.
Can I see that agreed?
Agreed.
Good. Which takes us to the health and wellbeing strategy. Councillor Charles. So move that.
I move the report, Chair.
I'll second that report. Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. Before I set out just some of the key highlights from what has been an extensive piece of work, not only by council officers but a range of parties externally who have contributed to it. I just want to say how grateful I was for the pre-group scrutiny session and then the scrutiny committee asking questions about the strategy during an extended session. I think we unearthed some practical things that could be factored into the wider consultation for the strategy. As you will see in the paper itself, the statistics that are born out of the Essex Joint Strategic Needs Assessment are sobering for our town. They cover a range of issues around substance misuse, challenges around physical inactivity, childhood obesity, which has been a trend in the town for some time and needs to be arrested, and wider issues around the socio-economic factors that contribute to people's health and well-being. So as a result of that, the Council has set out some broad strategic themes to measure the performance of how it tackles health and well-being issues in the town. Those three core strategic focus areas in the paper revolve around tackling specific health and well-being inequalities through a partnership approach, of course working with our local health care leaders, Essex County Council, which of course is the primary public health authority, reducing socio-economic determinants contributing to poor health outcomes in the town, and promoting independence and healthy lifestyles at every stage of someone's life. Now, in a departure from the usual way that we have put together these types of strategies, we've mirrored what Essex County Council have done and adopted the Robert Wood-Johnson model for the wider determinants. And the Robert Wood-Johnson model has a range of influencing spheres. So one of them is socio-economic factors, someone's education, someone's income, health barriers, whether alcohol use or smoking is a factor, clinical care access and quality to that in their local area, and the built environment as well, and the quality around that. And so that is that's baked into the strategic approach that we have outlined. Some of the complexities of this strategy that it's had to navigate is the changing face of the primary care, of course with the integrated care boards, with the advent of the legislation born out of the Health and Social Care Act 2022, and how that has organised primary healthcare provision and the focus areas around not just dealing with public health issues, but care services more generally, and how that is approached, and in particular addressing health inequalities. What we will do as part of this strategy is have a focused action plan. That work is already ongoing to deliver that action plan to complement what is in the strategy. There are a range of outcomes that we want to achieve by 2028. And of course there will be monitoring of the performance of this strategy and the resulting action plan, and that in fairness was a feature of the discussions in the scrutiny committee about how we were going about measuring that. I want to end though by saying this. Of course a lot of hard work has gone into this health and wellbeing strategy, but we should also remember, and I think it's important on a cross-party basis to say this, we've gone through a very difficult time as a town through the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting health consequences of that. And what I will say, in the spirit of cross-party working, is it's important to remember those councillors who navigated that situation and the work that Councillor Eugenie Harvey did on health and wellbeing was important during that time. We worked on a cross-party basis to challenge and confront those issues. And I hope, with this approach we set out in the strategy, that we endeavour to arrest the trends that we have seen, not just over the pandemic, but have been born out of years of issues around childhood obesity, substance misuse that is compounding issues in the town. What I want to see is an approach on a cross-party basis where we work to confront these issues head-on. What I've tried to be in this strategy, and what the Council is reflecting, is an honest approach here, because these figures are sobering. I look forward to the questions from councillors if there are some, and comments. But Chair, this is the strategy. We've really now got to get on and deliver. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Are there any questions, Councillor Durkin?
I've got two, just in case you want to move on. The first one is at the Health and Scrutiny Committee a few weeks ago, one of the Tory councillors made a comment that was recorded and received some public concern about the council paying for a fat club that would be held in public for councillors. As we're 1.8 million in debt and we've got residents living under plastic bags, do you think that is a reasonable recommendation or suggestion?
Thank you, Chair. With the health and wellbeing strategy, as I've said, Councillor Durkin, and I welcome the question, I think it's important to find ways to encourage people to look at ways in which they can live a healthier lifestyle. And I think we should encourage people and incentivise them that way as opposed to other ways of doing that. What we've said in the strategy is clearly physical inactivity is an issue in the town across generations. And I would be for, I think, an approach that we're trying to mirror in the strategy is that actually let's encourage people to think about getting involved in a sports club or other activities where they're getting out, they're being physically active. And so it's about encouragement and incentivising in that way, as opposed to any other ideas that may come up. And that's something that I said at the Scrutiny Committee.
And my second question, which links very much to your response to the first question, as we're in the highest point of the cost of living crisis, how are you expecting people to afford to join gyms and other activities? And certainly at last council we were coming up with some ideas and suggestions about warm places where we could bring people together and we could use that as a health opportunity to enrich people with options and opportunities. And the response we got is that you would deal with it after the budget. But the crisis is now, it's not. We're going to be in a different place in 4 months' time. So I was wondering, what are you doing to incorporate immediate action to address and resolve the issue of cost of living crisis that is affecting everybody within this great town? Thank you.
I think, Councillor Durkin, you raised an important question there, and everyone recognises the challenges born out of the cost of living. What I would say is only today I've put out a separate statement around the support that the council is channeling to vulnerable residences in this town around the cost of living, and I urge you to look at that press statement. What the strategy looks at is ways in which people, during the current backdrop, and we recognise the context that we're in and the current economic outlook, it's not just people going and getting a gym membership. There are other ways people can be physically active, and we're going to look at that. What I want to see as part of the consultation process that will now commence as a result of presenting this strategy is ideas around how we can work with different partners to encourage people to get outdoors and pursue physical activities. There's a range of different opportunities for people to pursue, and at the forefront of my mind is balancing that with affordability, of course. What we're trying to do is say, look, these are the key healthcare issues in the town. These are the key wellbeing issues, and we've got to put forward an action plan to arrest those trends. How we go about doing that, maybe some of the ideas that come out of the consultation process we can take up and factor into the action plan. But I think you raised an important point, and I urge you to look at the press statement I issued today.
Councillor Griggs.
Thank you, Chair. I should possibly at this stage declare a late interest. I didn't realise I was going to ask this question, but I wish to now. And that would be in my position as co-chair of Harlow West District Pride Group. And it would be remiss of me on World AIDS Day not to mention this in relation to this particular item. And that is the group, the Pride Group that I represent, not only is about having a social time and organising a pride event, waving rainbow flags and all the rest of it, we are supplying support services to a number of LGBTQ plus residents across the town, and would very much like, I guess if this is going to be a question, it is, can you ensure that we are including any further consultations on that? I have a number of committee members who would be very happy to contribute and make some very positive contributions to this strategy going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Greggs, of course, issues around LGBTQ plus individuals, the wider community in the town, are something that at the forefront of this council's mind, particularly more generally sexual health and wider issues around mental health. You'll be encouraged to learn that in the health and wellbeing strategy, we have made it very clear that we want to see parity between how we treat physical and mental health across the board. So groups like the one you have outlined are important consultees and individuals that we need to engage with going forward to understand if there are particular matters around their own health and wellbeing that need to be brought to the forefront of this type of work. So I'm grateful for that, and my undertaking, and I'm sure officers who work on these matters would be keen to engage with that group as well. So thank you for that.
There being no further questions, we'll come to comments. Councillor Mills.
Thank you. I'm going to morph into Councillor Edwards, who is unable to attend this evening, would like, obviously, has in many roles within and being obviously chair of the screening committee. Just made this statement about the process. He's just said, we welcome this as a starting document, particularly statistics which start to lay out some of the issues that the town has to address. We now need smart action plans. For one, the council working in partnership with other agencies, and two, for task groups which are obviously council specific.
Any further comments? Come back to Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair, and grateful for the questions and the comments that have been shared this evening. The focus now is to implement the strategic focus area of the health and wellbeing strategy to get the action plan where it needs to be in order to help arrest some of these very sobering trends that we've talked about tonight. That will be the focus. I've also given an undertaking to the scrutiny committee to come back to them at appropriate time to look at where we have arrived in terms of performance on the health and wellbeing strategy. It will probably be an ongoing feature for the scrutiny committee to engage with us on how we're achieving the key outcomes up to 2028, and that will be a focus going forward. So grateful for the points, but I beg to move the report.
We come now to the vote. Agreed.
Agreed.
Which takes us to item 17, the customer strategy.
Oppose that.
And I'll second that. Councillor Gunn.
Thank you, Chair. And good customer service for the residents we serve should be linked to everything that the council does. The way that we provide our services has significantly changed over the last few years, especially as technology continues to develop, as well as individuals' needs and expectations. So it's important that we seek to do the same. This also underlies the work that was done on the community engagement strategy approved earlier this year, and the work ongoing within IT, all of which feeds into this strategy too, under the umbrella of the aims contained within the corporate strategy. Customer service is not a single team function, and the Contact Harlow team, and we've said already what a brilliant job they do, require input from all areas of the council's operation to do their job. The whole council, HTS, and our other partners therefore have a role to play in our customer services approach, which is why, for those who've read the strategy, the One Harlow programme and the ethos within that is so important to the strategy. We know it's important as a council that we get things right first time, but that if things do go wrong, they get resolved efficiently. And whilst the majority of residents want to interact with the council digitally and online nowadays, we also need to continue to ensure those that need additional help are able to get it. So that's what this strategy seeks to achieve, building on the excellent work that's already been undertaken across the council, and with its associated action plan sets out how we seek to develop this in the future too. The way our residents engage with the council is evolving and changing, and through the strategy we set out a way to adapt to and with those changes. So I hope Cabinet will scrutinise the strategy and support it this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Gunn. Are there any questions? Councillor Vince?
Yeah, sort of sticking this in where I can really, but there's a question, there's a mention about consistent high customer service from the council, HTS and other partners. As I was on the HTS shareholder subcommittee, which hasn't met for 6 months, and I'm just concerned. We are ultimately the kind of conduit for the residents, to provide some of that scrutiny, and we're not able to provide that scrutiny for HTS currently. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts. And it doesn't have to be the same model, but I'm just concerned, and I realise there's a review. My concern is surrounding the question. My concern is currently we haven't got anything. So I just wondered, in terms of this, have you thought about how we can ensure that that works with HTS?
I didn't quite follow the questions about the shareholders.
No, I didn't either. I didn't either, don't worry, I didn't either.
I'm going to struggle to talk about the shareholders subcommittee, having not sat on it, have much to do
Well, it
with
hasn't
it.
sat for 6
No,
months.
I haven't been on it either, no. That's fine. No, just basically, the question very simply is, have you thought about how we can ensure there's better customer communication with HTS?
I certainly have, and it's true to say officers have too, and I think it's fair to say HTS customer services have as well. The one Harlow element of this does seek to bring closer together the operations, the customer service operations of HTS and the council. So that's very much underlying what's going on here, and I think it's important that those councillors who take a close interest in HTS, including those on the shareholders subcommittee, take this strategy on board and understand how HTS can improve its operations in line with this as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Briggs.
Thank you. In terms of measurement of customer service, it's a very simple question, and there will be a follow-up. I'll give you advance notice of that. Are contact Harlow calls recorded?
Yes, they are.
So if we search through the archives, we will be able to find a comment made to a resident, as I've been had it reported to me, when phones complained about water through his leaking roof coming down his walls, he was told to buy a VAT and claim for carpets off his insurance. Is that acceptable?
I wouldn't want to comment on allegations about contact Harlow staff without knowing some more of the details. It doesn't sound acceptable. I forget exactly when these calls started being recorded. I did deal with a question from the public some time ago before they were recorded, so I think it's a fairly recent thing. It would depend how historic it is. But certainly any calls within the last year or so have certainly been recorded. And there is a complaints process there to be made use of something inappropriate has been said.
Thank you. I'm putting Councillor Edwards' hat on again. He asked me to ask you a question. He used to know whether you're planning for council involvement, which you kind of mentioned, and whether this will be a cross-party approach when reviewing proposals for implementation.
Well, I always welcome cross-party support for things and involvement where appropriate. We all are here elected to represent the people of Harlow. This matters to residents in Staple Tide, who I suspect complain just as much as anyone else, and that'll be the same case for Little Parton and Hare Street Ward. So I fully seek to get on board every councillor, whatever political party they represent, and we've all got a role to play in making sure that our services work.
Just making sure.
Any further questions? Any comments?
Again, this is from Councillor Edwards. His comment was this looks like a massive piece of work, and while the objectives look good and would be difficult to argue with, the devil will be in the detail, particularly in a way in which we operate in the future. For example, cash decks and reception areas. And I think, from my point of view, I would say that although it's maybe useful to make a phone call or send an email or report something online, I don't think you can ever underestimate the importance of that human touch, particularly when you've got residents who are potentially vulnerable, and potentially residents that are suffering from social isolation, and residents where actually trips to the council to have a conversation with a council member of staff may well be their only, reasonable interaction in that particular day.
No further comments. I'll go back to Councillor.
I suppose just to speak to that point, the way that people are contacting the council is changing, and more people are wanting to do it online, but that doesn't mean that's the case for everyone. And I can see people at the back of the room who would make that point very strongly indeed, and rightfully so. So it's important that when we're doing this, we look to improve all ways in which people, residents, contact the council, and that will include people coming to attend the civic centre physically, where there is room for improvement too. And I stress it in forward, it's in my mind, that we need to ensure our services are accessible to all users, whilst recognising the importance that technology plays. So I would echo the comments from Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Councillor Gunn, which brings us to the vote. See that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Which takes us on to item 18, adoption of the Whitcham Development Brief, which I'll propose. Is there a second there?
Second, yeah.
Thank you. Just to speak, to introduce the item, it's a significant document which has gone through public consultation and we continue dialogue with those in the Whitcham area. It's an extension of the master plan vision we set out in March and is very clearly about actually delivering regeneration for the Whitcham area. I won't say more than that because everything else is included in the wonderful report. So are there any questions on the item? Councillor Vince.
Thank you, Chair. I read on page 248 the submission from Daniel Robson, FEMA Director, who obviously very disappointed with this report and the way in which it has been presented, and they feel they have been neglected in the consultation process. Obviously we want to be a council that support all business, and Daniel Robinson is a big business in Harlow. And I wonder, I have to say I thought the comments were a little bit, I don't think they were very well worded, and I think if I'd been worked for Daniel Robinson, I may well sort of a little bit agree. What work has the council done to sort of, smooth over that relationship and have further dialogue with them? Because we don't want a business like that in Harlow feeling aggrieved with the council over this consultation.
Thank you for that question. It's a very good one. And as you say, Daniel Robinson and Sons, a fantastic business in the town. In terms of your specific point, myself, the current Director of Strategic Growth and Regeneration and the Assistant Director of Planning and Building Control met with, I believe it was the Managing Director of Daniel Robinson and Son only on Monday to discuss these matters following his comments. I'm pleased to say it was a very positive meeting. We discussed a whole host of these issues and I think it was we came to a consensus at the end about the direction of travel moving forward. So I'm very confident that we've addressed concerns he sets out in the submission, having met with him, and there'll be an ongoing dialogue with the company going forward.
I don't suppose you can have any specifics about what those agreements are?
I don't think it'd be right to discuss what was a confidential meeting, but needless to say, I hope you would trust my comment. I think it was a very positive meeting. As I say, it'll be an ongoing discussion, not just with this business, with all businesses and organisations in that area as we take forward the regeneration of that area. Councillor Bennett?
Yes, I have a number of questions. The first one is in relation to page 195C, where Essex County Council have confirmed that a site for a primary school is no longer required in Whitcham. Would it be possible to understand what the justification of Essex County Council that enable them to arrive at that decision, and does that give a clear indication that actually Princess Alexandra Hospital will not be moving? Because again, one of the commitments made is when new housing was going to be built on that site, a new primary school would be done. So are they now saying that what's something that we've already known for a long period of time, that what our MP promised is not going to be delivered?
No.
And I've got other questions.
No, that's not the case at all. There's no reference to any of the things you mentioned. I don't believe there's any inference to the things you mentioned, and I don't think it's wise to link the two things. The government actually were very clear, again in the Chancellor's statement a few weeks ago, about the capital budgets for the new hospital programme, and the latest update we have is that is still moving forward.
So can I have an answer to the first question? Part of that question is why, therefore, if you're saying that the government are going to move the Princess Alexandra to a different site, and a clear commitment was made that school places would need to be provided, why has Essex County Council instructed us that this site is no longer required?
There's a couple of things to say on that. First, I apologise for not answering that in the first response I gave you. Second, as the report notes, it's the decision of Essex County Council as the education authority for that. But to the point you're making, it's not about the hospital. The hospital site, as it currently is, and as is designated in the local plan for new housing, there's nothing to stop a new school being built on that site should it be required, as is would be the case with any development of that size. So I think what I'm saying is you're wrong to link the Wych Elm development brief with the new hospital, and you're wrong to link the fact that Essex County Council don't believe that there is a requirement in this development brief for a new school on that site. That's not to say that when the time comes to develop the current hospital site, there won't be a need for a new school there. It's just to say that Essex County Council don't believe there is a need in this development brief for this development.
Well, you may be right, but I know that you're wrong, because actually the original plan was for housing. There was no, Andrew, Jane, nobody knows, we've seen the plans of the original outline of the housing stock that would be required to make it financially viable, and there was no mention of public accommodation. So on that, we'll agree to disagree as we do everything else. I've got another question in relation to K, which is quite confusing, which again is on page 195. Am I reading this correct, that if a company or a business simply says, we're not moving, there's nothing you can do about it?
There's a couple of things I'd say. First, in your sort of extended monologue at the end of your question, the plan application, this is just for pure clarity, the development plan and subsequent plan application would be required to build new housing on the current hospital site. It's not come forward. And it will be at the time that that application comes forward that you would know whether a school is included in it or not. That has not come forward, so you don't know whether a school is included in it or not, because there is no such plan application existing. On your point about K in the paragraph K in the report, you are well versed in regeneration matters over many years in this town, and you are well aware of any such position with businesses or landowners in those items. I think we take a slightly different approach to that which you took over many years. And in fact, that is the reason this development brief is coming in, is to move that development forward. Our vision sets that out. But we are not the ultimate arbiter of what private landowners choose to do. It's very well publicised as to what powers are available if they're considered necessary, but that's not what this report is about. It's about setting out a vision for that development brief, and I think it does so exceedingly well. Any further questions?
Absolutely. So going back to K again, can I just re-clarify that if it's a private business that's on its own land, and we can use the funeral directors that employ 120 people as part of their programme, but we could also look at Arriva Bus Depot if they re-sign their contract with the owners of the land, who I believe are in Scotland, or as indicated in your own report by Essex County Council Fire and Rescue, that they have got no desire whatsoever to relocate. You could even say the same for the ambulance site, which our own MP went and had a look at only 2 weeks ago and just made sure he had a photo opportunity.
We've got a question in there.
The question is, are you now saying that when we come to it, you will use the power of compulsory purchase to remove these people off that site? Yes or no?
No. Any further questions?
So you are confirming that. So if I go back to my original question, how are we going to deal with the matter if a business chooses not to relocate? You do have the law on your side to buy them out through legal means, but if they are saying, like the funeral directors, we're not moving, we've got our investment here, we're happy to do this, what actions can you take as a result?
This is the third time you've asked essentially the same question.
Yeah, I'll wait until I get an answer.
Okay, well, as we've been through this, we'll be moving on if you've got any further questions. The final answer I will give you is that I would strongly suggest that you read the detail about compulsory purchase orders, because the synopsis you've just given them is entirely wrong. And that's not actually the case at all, and that's not the means in which you would use them. I think report is clear about the direction of travel. I think it's clear about, as is the consultation document and responses to it, about our interaction with private landowners. And I don't think it's right, to be honest, to speculate about the future of private businesses at a council meeting. As I said, we had a very productive meeting with a private landowner earlier this week, and I don't think we should always be so heavy-handed if at first you don't get the outcome you might desire. Do you have any further?
Yes, still on K. So, which is the second part of the paragraph, the brief may specifically notes that if suitable alternative sites are not identified for existing users and they are not available at the time when an application is submitted for the land parcel, they will remain on the existing site or incorporated within the development. I hate to sound like I'm a broken record, but what happens if that business simply says, we're not relocating?
I'm not going to get into pure speculation about what may happen when a planning application comes forward. Okay, we're not going to go into that. I think, as you've just set out, which is very clearly defined in the brief, and I've answered a number of times, this brief is about how we take forward the regeneration of Wood Elm, which, as I've said, I think it does exceedingly well. Each case is taken on its merits, as you will well know, in planning terms. And this is about guiding development. It's not about dictating development. It's about guiding development and delivering, I think, what we would all want to see, the regeneration of the Wood Elm area. And there is ongoing consultation with all landowners in those areas, including some who are developers and some who are private businesses. And at the appropriate time, the appropriate conversations will continue with those, with all landowners, as the report sets out. So I don't have anything further to add on that line of questioning. So if we can move on to your next question, if you have any more.
Yeah, it's a similar question. It's about the relocation of the bus depot. The bus depot, Arriva have indicated within the report that they may be mindful to relocate from this particular site if the council could find an alternative suitable site. Have we got any ideas where those suitable sites would be, and would we therefore be financially responsible if they were having to relocate? We would fund that relocation.
I'm just going to answer the specific point, and I'm going to ask the Director of Regeneration to comment as well. I don't think it's healthy or proper to be speculating about the future of any businesses. The report sets out what it sets out and talks about options, about guiding development. It does not talk about the specifics of what might happen with any private landowner or any tenant of that land. I don't know if the Director has anything further to add.
I think just to re-emphasise, Chair, that the purpose of the development brief is to set out a framework in which future development proposals could come forward and give some indications around potential future land uses. It doesn't set out an actual plan for the development of specific sites. So at the moment there is no conversation with the Arriva company around a potential relocation elsewhere in the town. However, if at such point in the future they decided that a relocation to another part of the town was in their interests, then the brief sets out potential future uses of that site if it became available. At the moment, it isn't available for future development.
And just to clarify, my final point then is that there's no pressure on any of those businesses as a result of you adopting these recommendations that they will be encouraged to move. I'm just also very worried about the smaller businesses that are in that area, which are busy, active, employing local people. What we don't want to be doing is sending, perhaps I'm doing a comment here, so I
think we've got a question downstairs, and I think the Director will answer it.
Okay. I can confirm there's no pressure on any business to relocate. As I said in answer to the previous question, the purpose of the brief is to set out potential future development options should sites become available. If sites are not available, then businesses will not be forced to relocate.
Thank you.
There being no further questions, are there any comments? Councillor Derrick.
Well, I'm not entirely clear how much we've paid to have this report written for the council, and I don't know whether or not that can be answered at some particular stage, but clearly some activity has taken place. So whether or not we've gone out to a private company or we've done that in-house, there has been a fee. What surprises me about it is actually it doesn't tell us anything that we don't already know. So I'm not sure when we've got people under plastic sheetings in damp, mouldy areas, we're wasting money on reports when we should actually be dealing with the serious issues. But my concern is that we may well be sending out the wrong message to those local businesses that they do not have any future in this area. It's already said in the report we will need parking there, and we've got parking, but I agree it's horrible, it needs updating, etc. We do have a number of local tenants in that area who have had no investment for a long period of time, and I accept that over these particular issues. But we've got no money. We're already 1.8 million in debt, with I think a 200 million in loans outstanding, which is going to be increasing significantly, I assume, over the next few weeks. So I think what we need to be doing is just understanding, and I sort of agree with Andrew, all this is a set of recommendations. There are some good bits in it, I have to say, and I don't know why they're hidden, and I don't know why we need to write a report like this just to get that through, but absolutely the size of development and the height of the development is a significant concern and issue. But the bottom line of this report, what it's telling me, and I think which will be telling the significant members that I represent within my ward where this sits, is this is all about land grab, and it's all about building quick and high for the convenience of the council to sell off their land to pay back the debts of the £200 million and the 1.8 that we're dealing with every day. As long as it's only recommendations and there are no pressures put on any of those, the small people, the medium, the large, then I'm reassured that our due to be appointed CEO, we will take him on his word that that will be the case. Thank you for listening.
Any further comments? Thank you. In which case, I'll wrap up and just perhaps address some of the points that were made. And again, highlight the merits of this development brief. And it never fails to amaze me, actually, I should say, that for someone who was in the role of portfolio holder for regeneration many years, doesn't understand what a development brief is.
Insulting people doesn't help.
I'll just finish my comments. It'd be helpful if you didn't.
Could you please avoid microaggression and microbullying by being rude?
So just to address some of the points that were made, and it's a statement of fact and an inaccuracy in what was said, the £1.8 million figure that's been quoted, that's not true. The council is not in £1.8 million of debt in the way that you're suggesting. You mentioned that the council was hoping to sell off the land owned in Whittown to pay off its £200 million worth of debt. If you'd read the report in the detail that I presumed from your questioning, you would understand the council owns little of the land in Whittown. If I can just finish my comments, I didn't interrupt you. I presume only the £200 million figure you're referring to is from the housing revenue account. If perhaps you could, set out how it would be possible to sell land and pay off HRA loans, that would be flying in the face of the legal bounds of the HRA. So again, that's inaccurate. On your point about how much did it cost absolutely nothing. We didn't engage anyone private consultants. So just to clarify on that. It was very welcome to hear your comments on the item. I noted Councillor Vince put in a fantastic submission to the consultation. I noted that you did not. You mentioned about the height in the area. The height in the area, or the potential heights of such development, comes exactly, carbon copy in fact, from the Town Centre Master Plan. And I do recall when the Town Centre Master Plan came to Cabinet in March, it's literally etched in my brain that you said it was 95% of your work. So I'm not sure where the discrepancy is there, other than perhaps you're not quite sure on what was in the master plan. So to conclude, I think it's a fantastic development brief to guide development in the Wood Chelm area. There are applications coming in already, live applications, in which we are now able to guide, rather than having such development dictated by a national planning policy framework. We are able to guide it. We will continue the consultation with the businesses and organisations in that area. I'm very confident about the consultation that we've undergone, and in which case I think we'll move to the vote on the development brief. Is it possible to see that, agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Which takes us on to the Affordable Housing Section 106 policy adoption. I'll propose that. Can we get a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. I won't speak to this for a great deal of time because again it's set out in detail in the report. I think the only thing I wish to draw out is I think this is a very positive step in planning terms. It will increase the amount of investment the council can make in delivering social housing and affordable housing in the town, and I think that can only be a positive thing that will be wholeheartedly welcomed by all sides of the chamber. Are there any questions on the affordable housing section? No. Any comments? No. That's very quick for what is a pretty significant document, and will change the landscape of how we deal with these things. But I'm pleased that that's been wholeheartedly welcomed, which I think means we can move to the vote on the matter. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Which takes us on to the staple type SPD adoption, which I'll propose. If I can get a seconder.
I'll second that one.
Thank you, Councillor Gunn. I will keep again my introduction on this brief because guess what? It's about again delivering regeneration in our town. It's a fantastic document which will again guide development in this area, and I am very confident will deliver significant neighbourhood renewal in the Staple Time neighbourhood, which I'm sure is something we all wish to see. Again, it's come back from consultation with very positive feedback. And like I say, I'm very confident it will rocket boost investment and regeneration in that neighbourhood. So are there any questions? Councillor Director.
Yes, and I'm welcoming this initiative that is following on from the initiative that we commenced a couple of years ago, but there are some points of clarification, if I may. It's my understanding is part of the plan is to reduce the number of car parking spaces to make more seating areas, and it's my understanding that is going to be to the north of Poundland, which is currently, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, is that the parking for disabled people at the moment? And if so, are we going to be denying disabled people from parking outside the shops, or are they going to be sharing their parking with people sitting there, or is it going to be relocated when actually we don't own that piece of the jigsaw? So that's my first question. Would you like me just to do a run on that?
Far away.
Okay, the second one, of course, is that due to the location of Staple Tie, the report is absolutely very clear that the main mode of transport to get to Staple Tie or to use the facilities of the Staple Tie is actually by car, because there hasn't been a bus service to or drops off
at that particular location. Well, as far as I can ever recall, that there's never been one there. So if we're expecting it to expand and become more active and interactive, how are we going to address the opposite, that if we do not have any public transport, we're going to have to increase the car capacity? There's also questions in here about the type of car and whether or not there needs to be electrical points at certain situations to make that more preferable as a means of transport. My third point is that we do have some, no disrespect to people who live there, because I'm sure they do, but we do have some pretty horrible buildings, residential buildings, the block behind, and Risdons, which is a mixture of bungalows, etc., that are desperately requiring major and significant investment over these particular issues. We own them, and again, you know, I will keep banging the drum on the poor people who are living under plastic bags at the moment and worried whether or not it's going to rain or not. But what actions are we going to be taking over those particular areas? Two more questions. The next one is around Staple Tie News. And is it my understanding that this is privately owned, privately dealt with, but the report is saying it needs to be regenerated? So are we as a council going to pay for that regeneration out of public purse for a private company, or how can we persuade the private company that there is a need for them to invest in that particular site? And my final one, which may well be coming up from a secondary point, is that there's also an issue around the library and the space around the library and the parking and the green area around the library. And what assurances can you give that none of those things will be affected, as indicated in the report, that whilst you're saying the library facilities will stay there, the area around it, which is one of the few local green areas that people have, may well be redeveloped, and I'm assuming that will end up as more housing for the private stock. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durkin. And I think I can probably answer most of them in one point, which is I will draw your attention to paragraph 3 of the covering report, which states, the purpose of the Staple Tie supplementary planning document is to provide a clear, robust and deliverable development framework which can be used to help regenerate the Staple Tie neighbourhood centre and surrounding area, and goes on. We had this discussion when the master plan came to Cabinet back in March. This is a supplementary planning document. It's to provide a clear, robust and deliverable development framework. This is not a regeneration plan, this is not a development plan, this is not any such thing. This is to provide a development framework for that area, to bring certainty about the future, to guide development in that area, to guide investment in that area in the way that we think is best. And I would draw your attention to paragraph A in the reason for the decision, which is to enable the SPD to be formally adopted under Regulation 14 of the Town and Country Planning Act, because that sets out exactly what supplementary plan document is there to do. And I'm afraid it's not some of the things that you suggest. It's simply to guide development and provide a development framework for such items. So it would be wrong to sort of suggest that as a result of passing this, that there's the specific things you mentioned are to happen or not to happen. It's very similar to the discussion we've just had on the Woodcham development brief. It's to provide a development framework going forward. I think just on a couple of the other points you make about Staple Tie News, for instance, again, this is not about, I appreciate perhaps your sentiment about the role of the state in intervening in these matters, where private companies own things. This is about bringing forward certainty for them. You are right in that the news are privately owned. But this is about bringing certainty in a development framework in which they could perhaps invest and to guide such development. And I think probably the wider point I'm making about the role of the supplementary planning document will answer the fact that the specific points you suggest, I believe that the report makes clear that's not what is being sort of proposed as an action from this. This is to provide a development framework for that.
Well, thank you for your response, but all the questions I've asked are directly related to the document. So if you're saying we're ignoring the document and that we're not picking up any points within the document, I suppose that's your right and your responsibility. But then it does seem a bit pointless writing a document which you then produce. We ask questions on it and you don't feel able to make a response. So all the questions I've asked are directly in reference to the comments that are made within the document, and therefore I think I have a legitimate right to ask those, and B, you have a legitimate right to answer them.
Thank you for your further question. I think I may ask the Director of Regeneration perhaps to put in different terms as to what I'm saying.
Thanks, Joe. I think you covered the point about the purpose of the supplementary planning document, so I won't go over that. But in response to the specific questions, Councillor Devlin, you raised, disabled parking, there are no plans to remove any of the disabled parking at Stapleton Shopping Centre. As you said, it's not something the council owns anyway, so it would not be within our gift. But there are certainly no plans to do that. On bus services, as the SPD points out, one of the things we would want to do is to encourage increased public transport to the Stapleton area, and the purpose of the supplementary planning document would be to encourage future development proposals to identify how they can increase access to public transport, and we would certainly be wanting to work with the county council and with bus operators to do that as well. In relation to residents, and it's to some extent outside the scope of the brief in terms of redeveloping that estate. As you know, that's long been an aspiration of the council to undertake regeneration of that estate, and I think that remains. And we would need to look at how that can be delivered and funded, but I think there continues to be a long-term aspiration to achieve regeneration of that estate. Stapleton News, as the Chair has said, yes, that is privately owned, but the purpose of the SPD will be to give confidence to the owners there that they could come forward with development proposals that are likely to be supported. That's the purpose of the document. We'll not be forcing them to do anything, but we will want to discuss with them opportunities and work with them to bring forward proposals that could improve that area. And I think your final point was on the green space around the library. No, there are no plans to build on that. That is formally designated as green finger within the council's local plan, and therefore would have protection.
Any further questions? Any comments? Councillor Dirk.
In principle, I welcome the document because there is more positivity in the document than negativity. The thing that I like about it, which was our aspiration a few years ago, is that we wanted to try to use the space for small businesses, bring in local employment for local people, which makes it accessible, easier, so people are not having to commute, travel, etc., etc. Now, whether or not that might then link to the small businesses at Wych Elm that are concerned that they're going to be losing their tenancy as a result of it, whether or not the two can be put together, I'm not sure, but I think there are opportunities there. Very much around the health strategy, I noticed that in the report we were very proud to say that all the shops units were full. There were no vacancies over these particular issues. But actually, if you visit that area, you know that those units, the majority of them are unhealthy units regarding fast takeaway, unhealthy activities. And I know it's a business, and it's not for me to criticise businesses for doing that. And then the other main footfall in that area is actually a charity shop. So again, I do hope that as part of our aspiration is that we can work with the owners, because we don't own it. I don't know, Andrew, it used to be the Church of Wales that owned it when I was around, that we need to be, I don't know how we would do it, but we do need to put diversity of opportunity within those areas to make sure it is actually appealing. Because certainly a lot of what the documents and the comments were made is because it's a takeaway culture, and okay, we've got Lidl's and we've got Poundland at the far end, but in the evenings it just becomes a takeaway heaven. And you would only go there for one reason, which is, and we all do it, you know, great Chinese there, by the way, is that actually, and there are other Chinese, isn't there, over these, is that it does become a place that people would not want to use and visit unless they're going for purpose and design. So with our health strategy and our champions and our opportunities as a result of this report being recommended, I hope in the spirit of cooperation we can start working together to build up those relationships, to see whether or not there are incentives that can enable different types of outlets to be brought on board that makes the place more inviting, more interesting, and perhaps not a 9 to 5 and then after that you don't really want to go there. But on the whole, it would be quite childish of me to disagree with something that actually was our plan to be in the first place. So I welcome the report, I welcome the recommendations, and I know that you don't do this because you never have done this with me, but certainly with the previous portfolios and shadows of regeneration, we have worked together on issues. I know you won't allow that opportunity, but I hope in the spirit of the right thing for the right reasons, that opportunity will exist once more. Thank you.
Any further comments? Very good, which allows me to wrap up. Thank you, Councillor Durkin, for your support for the document. Just in terms of purpose, it serves a very similar purpose to the document, the previous item, which you just dismissed as not needing. The development brief and supplementary plan document serve very similar purposes, so I hope that clarifies that. Figure 2 in the document itself sets out the geographical area that is being referred to in this. It's not just the shopping centre, it's a number of areas around that, and I think the Director of Regeneration covered the purpose of this document and some of the specifics in it. Again, I welcome the fact that you support the ambition set out in the document and the vision and the confidence I hope this will give to bring further investment into the area and in turn regenerate it. There's just one comment you made about Witch Elm and the small businesses there. Perhaps I can just provide absolute clarity further to what was said previously, that no, the council is not in any way, shape or form driving out small businesses from that area. That's the opposite of what we're doing in the Witch Elm area. And the final point I wish to make, well actually I'll make two, given the final remark you made. I was very interested to hear about your plan for the State of Tyre, and that this was a continuation of that. I'm not aware of any supplementary plan document or any other such document that was ever created to convey that ambition. And if it were, perhaps I would question the success of it if we're having to write another one. But just on your final point about cross-party cooperation and my willingness to work with others, I dispute the comment you make in its entirety. I'm more than happy to work with anyone, and do work with lots of people, cross-party often, to deliver regeneration, as we've done in recent weeks, some significant opportunities for the council. And I think it's important to note that our sole ambition is to deliver regeneration in this town. and this is another way in which we're doing it. That being said, I think we can move to the vote. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Very good. Which takes us on to the environmental enforcement contract tender process outcome. You have a proposer? Seconder? Councillor Wells? Councillor Gunn.
Thank you, Chair. I know we're getting close to the end of the proceedings, so I don't think we'll want to take too long on this one, but it is something that's quite important. I think we have all had, I'm sure, residents expressed concerns about the previous contract in terms of that. So this is a process that's been on the go for a while, going back to about 12 months ago. I think we last discussed this at Cabinet. And we have got to the point of having run the procurement and having the most advantageous bid submitted by National Enforcement Solutions, which is recommended to be accepted. The headlines are that we have introduced through this procurement an educational focus in the work that they do and an alternative to issuing fines in certain circumstances. We've also ring-fenced time from them to focus on fly tipping as well as littering, which they did already have as part of their remit. But this ensures, from our point as a contractor, that we are buying a dedicated focus on fly tipping as well as littering. We'd already made significant progress with the issue of the contractor targeting technical fly tipping on estates, where there had been some pretty marginal cases, to put it politely. We've already dealt with that with them. They've worked very well with us on that. That's also reflected within the new contract. I don't think there's a huge amount more to say. I'm pleased with where we've got to on this. Littering does affect Harlow, it affects large parts of the UK. There's probably very few parts, if any, that are not affected by littering. There is a lot of work to be done to bring littering and fly tipping down, to educate where necessary, specifically on issues, for example, of discarding cigarette butts, where some people don't necessarily consider that littering, as it is. So I'm pleased that we've got to the end of the process. I'm pleased that we've had a solid set of bids, and hope the Cabinet will support this report and that the advantageous bid from NES be accepted.
Are there any questions? Councillor Vince?
Thank you, Chair. And obviously, in general, welcome. It's just a couple of questions, and I think Councillor Davis would not be happy if I didn't ask this question. Is there going to be, you mentioned a sort of individual cases, but is there going to be an appeals process as such?
Yes, any fine can already be challenged to the extent of going to the magistrates if you wish. There is a legal route of appeal. So there is inbuilt with this a way of appealing a fine if it's issued wrongly or is believed to be issued wrongly. That can be challenged.
But that's you have still the situation we have to go to court. There's no other way around it. You know, I'm just thinking out loud. The reality is, some people might get this fine, think it's unfair, and I know people like this, but actually going to court is just not worth it. And it doesn't quite seem right to me. That's all.
In the first instance, you appeal to the company, and there will have been instances where they've issued a fine, an appeal comes in, and they accept that they've made a mistake. They've said fine. That's the first stage. If you're not happy with that, or they stick with the fine, then you can take it to court. But the first instance is an appeal direct to the company. That's part of the process, and I'm sure that we've all dealt with instances of residents we represent challenging fines, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wasn't clear that was the case before. And is the process clear, you know, when you receive the fine, is it clear on there that the way in which you could do that? Or will it be, I should say?
Yes, I believe it. I believe it currently is clear on the documents that you received that you have the right to appeal. That is something that we could look to work with the contractor on if we're not satisfied the language is right. I'd need to be persuaded that's the case.
I just would appreciate it just being looked at, because it certainly wasn't the case, and you know, to start with, it may have changed, but I know, having talked to residents, when this system first came in, you know, sort of 6 months ago, well, it was more than 6 months ago, but 6 months ago, so I spoke to residents about this, that it was an issue, so I'd appreciate that. The other thing as well was just a question about, I know we're getting on in time, just about monitoring really, and kind of what the sort of process is for us as a council to monitor how effective, you know, the contract is going.
Well, I know we've had no difficulty getting very detailed data out of NES, and that's been borne out in questions from Councillor Davis and others in the past, and I anticipate that those questions would continue to come from him and others, and typically they'd get answered by the portfolio holder for environment. But I certainly recall answering questions about the detail of their work, and that was my gig once upon a time. I know that Councillor Peirce is well across the detail of the finance being issued. So we certainly have the ability to access data. There are specific requirements in the tender, as you'll see. For example, there is the 208 personnel per year dedicated to public education, and a specific amount of time needs to be dedicated also to fly tipping. And I'm very keen to ensure that officers hold the contractor to those commitments.
Will there be an expectation then for them to produce sort of quarterly written reports to the council to, confirm that they are doing what the contract states?
I think in practice officers manage the contract day to day rather than quarterly. Quarterly probably a step back from the level of engagement from an officer point of view. From a portfolio holder point of view, I think there is scope for more engagement with the company, and whether that's in the form of a quarterly meeting to review things, that's something that I'm sure we can explore with them. There is no commitment to do so at this point. It's probably more for the environment portfolio holder than it is for me to consider that. But certainly whenever I've required officers to provide information about the contract, they've been able to work closely with the company in real time.
Maybe no further questions, any comments? Very good. Move to the vote. Agreed?
Agreed.
Which takes us to communications from committee, working groups, parties and panels. There are none. Minutes of panels and working groups. There are none. That's version of business. I'm aware of any, and therefore 5